Bart Miller here with Cycling Strong. I've got Brian Oestrike with me today, and we're going to talk a little bit about Hypoxico, an amazing company. I use their tent at for Leadville, getting ready for it, Leadville 100. And Brian was amazing in helping me get kind of dialed in, what I need to do, and the difference this would make for me. I know out there in the marketplace, there's a lot of people that say, oh, this doesn't work. There's other people that say it does work, yada, yada, yada. For me, I felt like it really worked, made a good difference, and I was really grateful for having the experience and having Brian help me with that. Another thing that I wasn't aware that Brian was going to be at Leadville at another time that I was going to be at Leadville, and we were able to hook up before that, which was really cool too. So, Brian, I want to kind of go through, talk about Hypoxico, and kind of tell us a little bit about their background and what they're all about.
Absolutely, and yeah, Bart, thanks for having me today, and hello to everybody at Cycling Strong and whoever else is out there. Been super exciting to work with you for the last 6 months. I think it's been 6 months since you picked up the gear, and we're really excited. It's been a good year for us. We've worked with a lot of fellow Leadville mountain bikers and runners, and it's been a really solid season. So excited to answer any questions you have.
Okay. So tell us a little bit about Hypoxico. I mean, why do you do what you do, and where did this company start from?
Myself, I actually started out as a climber, so I had climbed a bunch of big mountains, and I had climbed Everest in 2007. And at that time, I basically, like a lot of other climbers, just was pretty frustrated at the amount of time it takes to climb one of these giant peaks. Basically, you're there for almost 2 months, and a lot of that time is actually spent just kind of sitting around at base camps and just acclimatizing. And so after that, I actually heard about Hypoxico from a cycling friend who's based in Portland, Oregon, Pat Marzullo. And he told me about the technology, and it just kind of got the gears turning for me in terms of, what could this do for a climber if you're pre-acclimatizing before a trip. And so I basically did a test climb of Aconcagua, which is 23,000 feet in Argentina. My goal was to basically just use the tent and equipment aggressively at home, and then see how fast I could climb a mountain that's normally done in 2 to 3 weeks. And so I went down there and I climbed it in about 2.5 days and was totally blown away. And I've been working with the company ever since.
That's
so
awesome.
That's myself. The company itself was founded by Gary Kotliar, who basically is a brilliant engineer that's has quite a few patents in this industry, as well as in some neighboring industries. Basically, he is a scientist and is more focused on kind of like the wellness element of hypoxic training, but being the scientist he was, he understood the potential for any kind of athlete that's using this equipment and what it could do for them. And so he was basically living in New York, and so he founded the company in New York. And since then, we've grown through the years, and we have still a pretty small operation, 7-8 employees, most of which are collegiate athletes, professional runners. Myself, I came with a climbing background, and so a lot of dedicated athletes. We all work hard and do great things. We have pretty large international network, quite a few distributors worldwide, and we're really shipping all over the world. So to kind of any type of athlete you can imagine.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, so let's talk about what's the number one benefit from the product for somebody?
I mean, that basically is dependent on the athlete themselves and really what you're doing. So for me, I think I just explained, for climbing, for me, it allowed me to climb mountains really quickly and shorten my itinerary and basically kind of get home a little faster from a trip. For endurance athletes, it really is about increasing your endurance and ability to kind of go. A lot of athletes are competing at altitude, and so the acclimatization is quite similar for them as it is for a climber. you can show up in Leadville a little later, which a lot of the mountain bikers such as yourself chose to do. If you're a sprinter, the training is going to help you be kind of more explosive. If you're a boxer, you're going to have greater muscle recovery. Anytime you can clear lactate more quickly, you'll basically have diminished fatigue. And so that's really, you can kind of imagine that really impacts every type of athlete.
Absolutely.
So oxygen utilization and transportation. There's also a lot of wellness applications. We work with individuals who use our equipment for accelerated weight loss. Basically, by exercising at altitude, your body is kind of running a little faster, and so there's going to be an accelerated weight loss there. Diabetics have benefited, asthmatics have benefited, and so there's a lot of other applications. And so really is about what you're trying to do.
Overall, okay.
So what about yourself, Bart? I mean, what did you find to be the number one benefit?
Yeah, I think my biggest benefit was obviously being able to come to Leadville at the camp and not feel as fatigued and be ready to go, like you said, and then come back to camp and actually not be worried about the altitude, worried about the race. And so that was a really plus for me to be able to focus on racing, not worried about if I was going to die at the top of the mountain. So, which I still felt like I was going to die, but it wasn't because of altitude. It was just strictly because I should have trained better, I guess, or more. But so I want to talk about this question. Give me a 2-month scenario of how I would use your product.
And again, this is going to, we're really all about kind of customizing protocols and really orienting the training to the individual's needs.
Yeah.
So again, it's really dependent on what you're doing exactly. For your situation, you're a mountain biker, so you're a cyclist that is preparing to go compete at altitude, and so you're kind of using it for acclimatization as well as for performance and accelerated recovery. And so, for the most part, the 2-month routine is we'll kind of have you start by sleeping in the tent and really building some acclimatization by exposing yourself to long periods of altitude. And so normally for a sea level dweller, we'll kind of have them start around 5,000 feet and slowly increase the elevation by about 500 feet every night. And so normally it'll take 1 to 2 weeks to kind of get up to 9,000 feet, which is where most of our endurance athletes sort of stay. That's been found to be an elevation where you're going to get really high quality rest, yet benefit from the altitude. That's kind of been tweaked a little bit through the years, and some of our athletes have sleep higher. But that's where most of our endurance athletes sleep. So for Leadville, just kind of continuing with the tent, we'd have you again for up to about 9,000 feet for it'll take about 2 weeks to get there, and then we'll probably kind of have you stay there, make sure you're doing well, your workouts are all going real strong, and this added element of training isn't going to throw off any of your other training.
Right.
And so at that point, we'll also kind of, a lot of our athletes will choose to mix in some mass-based training or active training. And so that can be done on any kind of stationary device. For yourself, it would be presumably on a spin bike. And so the degree and the amount you're going to do that is really based on kind of where you're at in your normal periodization schedule of your training as you lead up to a race. So if you're in your base building phase, I guess you'd probably be a little further along at that point. But if you're in your base building phase, you're going to do longer, slower workouts. If you're kind of in your interval, more intense, later parts of the season, you're going to be pushing it a little harder than that. And so normally, just to kind of keep it generic, that's going to be 3 to 5 days a week for 30 to 60 minutes, depending on kind of your needs. And so, the first month of that 2-month, we're kind of building up on the tent as well as the mass training. Mm-hmm. And then during that last month, we're kind of pushing it a little bit higher, a little bit harder. because you're also trying to crank up Columbine Hill at 12,500 feet, which is extremely difficult for a cyclist, strong cyclist doing that at sea level. That climb is not a huge deal, but when you throw in the altitude, it's heinous. And so at that point, that last month, we're going to have you kind of sleeping a little bit higher than that on some nights. Normally, that's done by kind of kicking it up 10,000 feet, maybe back down to 9,000 feet, 11,000 feet, back down to 9, and really kind of monitoring your sleep quality during that period. We still want you to have really good quality sleep, but but still pushing it so you're acclimatizing further.
Right.
And so, and at the same time, we're going to have you doing kind of more workouts with the mask to mimic that workload you're going to have up at Columbine Hill.
Right.
We're going to want you to desaturate. Now, it's one of the questions I'm sure we'll get to. All of our training is done with a pulse oximeter, and it's a little fingertip device that's measuring the percentage of oxygen in your blood. And so all of our training protocols are sort of designed and oriented around those figures.
Yeah.
To put in perspective, the sleep training, we really want you to desaturate below 95%, and that's where you're going to see immunological changes that you're looking for. And that's for kind of a sea level dweller. If you're trying to, crank at 12.5 during the Leadville race, then you might be desaturating further and trying to go below that. And that's, again, it's an attempt at a generic training plan to sort of describe this, but 9,000 feet is going to be a lot of times where people find that sort of sweet spot.
Okay.
But for the active training, you're going to be targeting numbers down in the low 80s, which is probably where you're going to be when you're climbing Columbine Hill. So our goal there is to really mimic those conditions, and so your body's familiar with the workload. And so as you get closer to the race, those last 2 weeks for any athlete, it's kind of tricky, the tapering game, and whether this is your peak race or not, it is going to kind of dictate what you do with the tent, your sleeping elevation, as well as your mask training. A lot of times we find that our clients, they're looking for muscular recovery in that tapering process, and so they'll actually use the mask training as a substitute for their normal workouts, and so they might still do those mask workouts right up to the race. Other people want a full rest in their tapering process, and so that's going to be sort of a different scenario. Those finer questions really come down to integrating it with your normal plan and how, what you're doing there and what your goals are there. But that's kind of the typical approach you'd use for a mountain bike race at altitude.
That's awesome.
For sea level, it's going to be a little less aggressive, basically, in those last few weeks, and again, it's going to be dependent on the athlete. A third training method we haven't discussed is called IHT, or intermittent hypoxic training, and that's done with the mask on as well at generally elevations around 21,000 feet. And our goal with that is to expose you to higher elevations, so you're desaturating further, yet you're not exercising. And so a lot of our clients use that for wellness purposes, and their typical sort of therapy session will be 5 minutes with it on, 5 minutes with it off, and so. And again, with a target saturation of close to about 80%, which is quite similar to what you're targeting on your active workout. And so, as far as the integration, as you're getting close to a race, you might choose to do that training rather than an active workout, when just simply because you need rest, but you still want to acclimatize.
Yeah. For me here in Idaho, I could probably just leave it off at 5,000, right?
Yeah, that's a more challenging question for sure, is how to use the equipment when you're at altitude, because there's just more factors at play. In general, you're not getting as good a rest and so forth. So I guess to try and kind of describe the other scenario, we're seeing a lot of athletes that are like boxers and sprinters and kind of explosive athletes, and they tend to kind of lean towards more of the IHT and the active training with the mask, and that's product of what they're trying to do. They're not trying to acclimatize. They're trying to really kind of help with their lactate buffering, and
Right.
so semi-different approach. But those are kind of the both thresholds and the tools we use to sort of figure out how to best use this for each athlete.
The next thing would be, are there any vitamins or supplements that should be taking when using the product?
Yeah, and that's a really solid question that we hear all the time. In my opinion, Bart, nothing really beats a healthy, well-rounded diet. And if you can hit that, your body's gonna be able to handle this altitude without a problem, without any kind of needed support. And so my suggestion to our clients is to get their blood testing and blood tested and to talk to their doctor. As long as there's no other illness or injury or I guess in this situation, you don't really need to take a supplement. That being said, we do, for instance, a lot of our female clients, they'll be deficient, they'll be anemic to some degree, and so oftentimes they'll end up taking iron. And so if there was any supplement that was kind of common that our clients need or with talking to their doctors, we figure out that they should take with the altitude tent, it is iron. And so we really just want to ensure you have sufficient iron levels. And then after that, it's the same as everything else that an athlete needs, and that's really a well-rounded diet.
Got you. Okay, good to know. Why are you based in New York?
Yeah, this is a great question. So we have we get this question all the time, and I ask myself the question at the same time. It's does it make sense? A lot of our clients, you'd be surprised, are not the outdoor athlete type, and so we work with the majority of our clients do live in big cities, and so certainly a huge population of our clients live in the mountains and that, but we're at sea level here, and so simulated altitude does make sense. From a business perspective, Gary was living here at the time, and so we opened up here, and we work with so many international distributors, and we have clients coming in from Europe and South America and sort of all over the place, and so it makes sense because people are just always passing through New York.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's for me, kind of being a mountain guy, it was an interesting transition, but the longer I'm here, the more I like it, and actually the more it makes sense from a business perspective. So
very cool. Okay, good. What should people look at when they're looking for this type of product? And I'll preface that with before I ended up going with your company, I did look at other products and kind of weighed those odds out. Everything from, okay, how's this going to work compared to this, and I saw some value in the other products, but not the overall value that you guys had to offer. At the same time, you guys were a little more expensive than that, but I thought the added benefits were well worth the investment that I was making in the kind of race I was doing. So kind of expound upon that a little bit if you would.
Yeah, and so I mean, what should you be looking at when you're thinking about this type of product? And it kind of goes back to my point earlier that you should be thinking about what your performance goals are, and whether this equipment can help you achieve that. Will oxygen utilization or being pre-acclimatized help you with what you're doing? And so beyond that, it's really there are some other competitors out there, and there's equipment out there that does this, but it that's only one part of it. Certainly you need to know what you're doing with it and how to best sort of integrate this with your training, with your lifestyle, and be able to kind of adjust accordingly as those things change. For me, I was a climber for years. Now all of a sudden I'm trying ultra running and stuff, and so it's a very different approach. And I find it's something our clients are constantly changing sports, and going from one to the next. And so, maximizing the use of the equipment, you need to know what you're doing. And so, we're really happy to help with our clients anytime, get ready for, their next objective. So.
Yeah, and I find that's true. I've never not called you guys and had some great support and help on that, and I appreciate it.
My favorite was, just seeing Idaho license plate and hearing your voice in the park lot or bed and breakfast. I mean, like, Bart, is that you?
Yeah.
and your license plate says Bartman, so that should have been a clue.
Yeah.
So you're probably going to find that with our competitors.
Yeah, no, that was awesome. It was really cool to chat with you and have that relationship when we got there. It was really cool. What are the, let's just go, I have down here 10, but let's go with the top 3 most frequently asked questions, and then let's go with like the top 3 should be asked questions, if you don't mind,
Sure.
for your product.
Sure, and that's, because there's a lot of funny questions. I mean, the one of the most common is, what's my wife going to think of this, or what's my husband going to think of this that's not using the tent, and so that's probably the most, it's not the most serious question, but
Right.
it's a super common question. And, I can't really answer that one, Bart.
Yeah.
It's really up to the person. There are wellness reasons for using the tent, and so, that's a big part of it. But it is comfortable, and if you're acclimatizing, there's no reason, if you're acclimatizing together, there's no reason not to sleep in the tent. It is something that you can both share and benefit from, and so that's a really common question. Another one is the tent safe? Is the equipment safe? We are removing oxygen from the environment, and so that's obviously a concern for a lot of people. Our equipment our tents are specifically made to be permeable, and so theoretically you could sleep in the tent without the generator even running, and you would be drawing air inside. That's a huge part of it. The generator itself, it has an extremely obnoxious alarm. If there's a power failure or something like that, it's going to wake you up and let you know. Another one is that I go back to, and it's kind of based on my mountaineering experience, is if you're sleeping too high, the deal is you're just not going to sleep. If you're trying to move up the elevation too quickly, you're just not going to sleep. And so, those internal alarms are huge as well. The equipment itself, if it were to fail, it would fail in the direction of increased oxygen. And so you'd wake up and you'd be at sea level and not at a higher altitude than what you set it for. So, all those things make it extremely safe. We've never had any problems besides our Type A clients that get the equipment and turn it all the way up to 12,000 feet the first night and don't sleep. And so that's, as you might imagine, that's pretty common for us. So that's kind of something that, we can say, but, are you going to listen?
Yeah.
What else? Let's think here.
What should they be asking? We've got 3 now that, are the most common. What really should people be asking when they're looking for a product or doing this?
Yeah. I have several questions here because I knew this would be a tricky one.
I know one thing is that I thought of was they should be asking about support.
Yeah.
Because, for me, I called on a couple of other products and the support just wasn't there. With you guys, the support was amazing. So I think that's a big question to ask yourself when you're buying something like this.
Sure. And the biggest one, actually, Bart, that's I think the most difficult. How do you know if it's working? And for me, before I started working with the company, I needed to know that question, and so I tested it, as aggressively as I possibly could. And there's a lot of ways you can do that. You can get your blood tested and see improvements there. For me, it's more I've been able to see myself build a resistance to hypoxia. And you can do that by just noticing that you're able to push it higher and harder at the same altitude. And so in terms of measuring that, you can do that by monitoring your oxygen saturation, keeping a basic journal that's even if it's tent-based training, waking up, I slept perfect last night, so that's writing down 10 sleep quality, my oxygen saturation in the morning was 92%, just kind of right, and keep track of your improvements there. Certainly, you can measure with races, with performance tests such as lactate threshold or VO2 max tests. And so, how can you really measure and see that it's working? For us, we do offer a rental plan, and so basically it's a rent-to-own option, and you can use the equipment, the rental, an 8-week rental towards the purchase of the equipment, so you can really see if it is working. So, for Leadville, for instance, we'll get a lot of clients that'll rent for 6 to 8 weeks, and then decide that, hey, that did work, and I'm going to do the Hard Rock 100 run next year. So I'm going to buy this. So to really see that it works and that it's right for you, and then decide to make an investment in the purchase. So
yeah,
that's a great one. For cyclists as well, you can as far as measuring your resistance to the altitude, it is to keep track of in an active workout, use an ergometer and measure your wattage or output of any type at the same altitude and the same oxygen saturation. So you're going to see a difference there, and it directly translates into performance on your next climb or race or run. So
yeah.
One question for you, Bart. I'm curious if you can answer this one. How to calibrate, how to figure out what it means when you live at 5,000 feet. How to determine what the elevation is, kind of what you should sleep at. So, you living at 5,000 feet, what's the elevation that you're sleeping at, and how does that work?
So what I did is I actually did go to 10,000 pretty well. I know that they recommended 9,000, but I decided, where I'm sleeping here anyways, I'm a little more acclimated, I'm going to try 10. So I did. So most of my sleeps were at 10,000. When I was about 3 weeks out, I bumped it up to 11,200, I think it was, or right around 11,000 something. And it really didn't affect me that much. So I was like, okay, I'm going to sleep here for a week and just see how that, how I did there. And then for 2 days, I bumped it up to 12,000 just to see what that was like. And when I hit 12,000, it did start to really affect my sleep, a lot more. I mean, I could sleep through the night, but it wasn't as good a sleep. And you'll notice that when you sleep in the tent when you're not having great nights. So I saw that. So then I backed down to 10,000, and I stayed at 10,500 from there till basically I was ready to come to Leadville and did my workouts. I did every time I would do a big workout, like if I did it on a weekend though, I would take a day and drop it right down to 5,000. Like I basically sleep where I was at, and I'd let my body recover, and I wouldn't sleep in the tent. So there were days I did that, and I think what I needed to do more with the product, and I was lazy in doing, and you recommended me doing it, was more mask workouts. But it's just the mask is something I had to put for my bike downstairs, my bed's upstairs, and getting all that hosing and all that. That's where I was weak at, and I should have spent more time probably with mask training than I did with the tent training. But the results were coming through the tent, so I was like, I'm too lazy to stretch this hose down there and do my workout. So that was kind of my weakness. But I slept at 10,005. That was what worked for me.
Sure. And that's, you brought up a ton of good points there. I mean, the last point you made is it's, before, in these last 2 months before your peak event, you kind of need to be outside on the bike. And so it's, and it's, the weather's nice in Idaho then. So, you do want to be outside. And so, we want this to support your other training and not, be a replacement for it. I find that a lot of our clients, they will use the mask training more in the winter, kind of the base building phase. It's cold outside, so you can kind of get more of that then. And maybe they're using it as a substitute for sleeping in the tent in the off season. So basically, if you live at altitude, you're adding that elevation onto the elevation of the generator setting. And so And also, you do, because you are so acclimatized, because you're living at 5,000 feet 24/7, it does sort of change the training combination that we suggest. And I think it's great that you took a night off here and there, and that makes sense, especially if it's a hard race or ride. So, and all those things are adaptable. I mean, one of the biggest parts of the training is to sort of use your common sense and not to force that additional stimulus when you don't really need it. So,
Right.
so do take a night off. Just like you're taught with your training schedule to be adaptable based on lifestyle type stuff. So.
Yeah, awesome. All right, so to wrap this kind of up a little bit, is there anything that you want to talk to the clients about, tell them how to find the product, and any last points that you kind of want to stress about the training? I mean, I fully endorse it. I thought it was amazing for me. I loved all the help that you guys offered me, and it was even funner to see you at Leadville and see the difference it made for you and over your adventure this year. And I know you can follow you guys on Facebook, because I do follow you on Facebook. I see all the cool athletes that you're out there sponsoring and their accomplishments with it. So really cool product. So kind of take it from there and kind of give us a wrap up of where they can find it, some last things that you think are really important for the athletes out there and they should know.
Yeah, thanks, Bart. And I think we've covered quite a bit, but everybody has questions that we might not have addressed here. So
Yeah, for sure.
Basically, feel free to give us a call. We're always around, and we have a lot of great sales reps that can address any of these questions, and maybe from a perspective that makes more sense than how I've addressed it today. So visit us at hypoxico.com. And yeah, we're happy to hear from you in the social media world, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, any of that fun stuff. So really give us a call before your next race, or even if you're plotting it for next year. If you're looking at a trip that's at altitude, don't feel like the guys at altitude are automatically going to crush you. Option, and you can keep up. So I really appreciate everybody listening, and thanks a ton, Bart.
You bet. Well, thanks, Brian, and we appreciate Hypoxico taking the time out of their lives to put all this gear and equipment together for all of us cyclists, runners, and I guess crazy climbers. I think climbing just classifies in craziness, so we'll call that. But thanks again for your time, and we'll be touching base with you guys more, and I'm sure we'll have another interview on some of the questions we'll get from this, and that way we'll be able to expound upon and help people out there. So thanks again, Brian, and we'll be talking to you soon.
All right, thanks a lot, Bart.